Multi-agent coding does not break in the dramatic way people imagine. It usually breaks in the boring way. One agent says it found the right file. Another agent says it wrote the test. A third agent says it changed the implementation. Then you come back 10 minutes later and nobody can tell you what is actually true. The test agent wrote tests against the old shape. The implementation agent changed a file the planner assumed was stable. The reviewer is reviewing a diff that already changed underneath it, and every agent sounds confident because every agent only sees its own little story. That is the problem. OMG is trying to solve not better code generation, not a smarter chatbot, a local ledger for coding agents that sounds painfully boring until you run more than one agent on the same repo. Then boring becomes the whole game because parallel agents do not need another inspirational prompt. They need shared state, who owns this task, which files are in play, what is blocked, what passed, what failed, what was only claimed, what was actually verified. That is the difference between an AI dev team and 4 chat windows shouting done at each other. OMG is interesting because it treats agent work like work that needs accounting, lineage, handoffs, reservations, dependencies, messages, observed, get state, verified completion. That is not glamorous. Good. Glamour is how agent demos get away with skipping the part where the work has to be resumed, audited, merged, and trusted. Hey, don't forget to like and subscribe for more like this. Now, back to the video. The first thing OMG gets right is that it is not trying to be the genius, it is trying to be the notebook. That distinction matters. Most AI coding tools compete to be the agent you talk to. OMG is more like the thing all those agents write into. The explorer writes down what it found. The test writer writes down which behavior it covered. The implementer writes down which files it touched. The reviewer writes down what is still risky. The human can then read state instead of reading vibes. That is a very different product shape. In a single agent session, the chat transcript can pretend to be memory. It is not great memory, but it is something. With multiple agents, the transcript stops working. There is no single transcript anymore. There are several partial stories. Each one is missing the thing another worker learned. That is how duplicate work appears. That is how 2 agents open the same file with different assumptions. That is how an old plan survives after the repo changed. OMG's ledger idea is simple. Put the state somewhere outside the model, make it local, make it explicit, make it inspectable. Do not rely on one agent remembering what another agent said in a different conversation. That is not a model upgrade, that is systems thinking. And AI coding needs more systems thinking. The phrase verified done is the heart of this. Agents love saying done can mean many things. I edited a file. I think the patch is right. I ran a command but did not read the output carefully. I wrote tests, but they do not pass. I passed a small test, but not the full check. I stopped because the response looked complete. Those are all different states. A human team would not treat them as the same thing. An agent workflow often does. That is where a ledger earns its place. Claimed done and verified done should be separate. Claimed done means the worker believes its part is complete. Verified done means evidence exists. The test passed, the diff was reviewed, the block decision was resolved, the file reservation was released. The next task can safely begin. That difference sounds small until you're trying to resume work after 3 agents have all said they finished. If OMG only did one thing well, I would want it to do this. Make done mean something, not emotionally, operationally. What evidence supports this state? Who produced it? When did it happen? What changed after that? Can another worker trust it? That is a kind of boring question that prevents expensive confusion. Path reservations are another unsexy idea that becomes important fast. Imagine 2 agents working on one feature. One is writing tests. One is editing implementation. Both decide the same file matters. The test agent reads the file at 10:01. The implementation agent changes it at 10:02. The test agent writes tests based on the old behavior at 10:03. Now both agents are making progress, and the progress is already misaligned. Nobody did anything stupid. The system just had no shared state. A path reservation does not need to be heavy. It only has to say this file is being touched by this worker for this reason. That tells other agents to slow down. Maybe they wait, maybe they branch, maybe they ask for a handoff, maybe they read but do not edit. The important part is that the conflict becomes visible before the merge conflict. That is a theme with OMG. It is not trying to make agents omniscient, it is trying to make hidden collisions visible early. Early visibility is often enough. You do not need a perfect coordinator, you need fewer surprises. The local first part matters more than it sounds. A coordination ledger for coding agents is not harmless metadata. It can contain task names, file paths, messages, branch state, failure notes, security concerns, maybe even hints about unreleased features. That is sensitive project context. Keeping that local by default is a sane choice. The more agent systems become control surfaces, the more careful they need to be about what they store and where they store it. OMG being daemonless by default and local first is not just an implementation detail. It is part of the trust story. It also matters that a ledger does not need to own every dangerous action. It does not need commit authority. It does not need push authority. It does not need deploy authority. It does not need secret access. It does not need to delete files. It can be useful by observing and recording state. That restraint is good. Coordination tools have a way of becoming control planes if nobody stops them. At first, they only track work, then they trigger work, then they approve work, then they own the workflow. For coding agents that can get risky quickly, the safer shape is a ledger that remembers without grabbing every lever. Let agents do work in their own sandboxes. Let the ledger record the state. Let humans decide what authority gets added later. The test for OMG should not be a pretty demo. It should be a messy feature. 1 repo, 3 agents, 1 human who leaves halfway through. The first agent maps the code. The second writes failing tests. The third implements the fix. Then the human comes back and asks the question that matters. What is actually true right now? Without OMG, the answer is usually scattered. One chat says the relevant file is this. Another says the test is written. Another says the implementation passed. But the claims are hard to compare. Did the implementation happen before or after the tests? Did the test target the final behavior or the old behavior? Did anyone run the final check? Did 2 agents touch the same file? Did a block decision get resolved or worked around? With a ledger, those facts should be easier to reconstruct. That is the score, not whether the agents feel futuristic. Can a human re-enter the task quickly? Can another agent continue without inventing the past? Can the team see the difference between work in progress and verified state? If yes, OMG has a real job. If no, it is only another layer of notes. The failure mode is ceremony. This is the danger for every coordination tool. It starts by reducing confusion. Then it becomes a second job. Create the task, update the task, link the task, move the state, write the handoff, approve the handoff, explain the blocker. Now the agent work has become a tiny project management system. Developers will not tolerate that for normal coding, so OMG has to be lighter than the confusion it removes. That is a standard. For a tiny fix, maybe the ledger only records that 1 agent owns the task and which check passed. For a larger feature, maybe it records subtasks, reservations, blockers, and handoffs. For a resume task, maybe it shows only the last verified state and the next unresolved decision. The tool should scale with the mess, not force every change into the same ceremony. This is where product taste matters. Good coordination feels like the room got quieter. Bad coordination feels like another meeting appeared. If OMG can stay quiet until the work needs state, it has a chance. If it demands attention on every small step, developers will go back to chat logs and hope. Handoffs are the best first use case. Not giant swarms, not fully autonomous teams, handoffs. Because handoffs happen constantly. You stop for the night, you switch machines. You ask another agent to continue. You split tests from implementation, you park a block task, you come back after a review. Every one of those moments asks the same question. What should the next worker know? A good handoff is not a transcript. A transcript is too much. A good handoff is compressed state. Goal files touched, files reserved, checks run, known failures, block decisions, what not to do. Next recommended step. That is what an agent needs. That is what a human needs. That is also what a ledger can store better than a model can remember. The model can summarize. The ledger can persist. Those are different jobs. Treating them as the same job is one reason long agent work gets sloppy. There is also a Git angle here. Agents live near Git, but they should not always own Git. Observing Git state is useful. Which branch is active? Which files changed? Which files are untracked? Which changes appeared after the last verified state? Which agent claimed which path before the diff changed? That information helps the ledger tell the truth. But observing Git is different from controlling Git. An agent coordination system does not need to commit for you to be useful. It does not need to push. It does not need to reset. It can simply notice that the ground moved that is already valuable. If a worker says the test passed, but the implementation file changed after that, the verified state may no longer mean what it meant. If a reviewer says the diff is clean, but another agent touched a reserved path afterward, the review is stale. If a tag says blocked, but a branch now contains the missing dependency, maybe it is not blocked anymore. This is the kind of quiet state checking that models are bad at holding in their heads. A ledger can do it better because it does not get tired and it does not need to infer the past from a chat transcript. OMG is really about recoverability. That is the word I would put over the whole thing. Speed is easy to sell. Recoverability is what makes speed safe. If an agent moves fast but nobody can reconstruct what happened, the speed becomes risk. If 3 agents move fast, but the human can see the task graph, file reservations, verified checks, and stale claims, the speed becomes manageable. That is the difference. AI coding tools keep promising more autonomy, but autonomy without recoverability is just a longer leash. When the agent gets confused, you need to know where the confusion entered. Was the plan wrong? Was the handoff stale? Did the test agent read old code? Did the implementation agent skip a block decision? Did the reviewer approve a diff before the final change? If the system cannot answer those questions, the human has to manually reconstruct the run. That is painful enough with one agent. With multiple agents, it becomes almost impossible. OMG earns its place if it makes the run reconstructible, not perfect. Reconstructible. The most important word in all of this is state, not memory. Memory sounds vague. State is sharper. A model can remember a conversation. A ledger can record a task state. Those are different. Memory can be fuzzy. State should be inspectable. Memory can be summarized. State should be updated. Memory can be wrong in ways that sound plausible. State should have evidence attached. This is why agent systems need external state. The context window is not a database. The chat transcript is not a task manager. The final answer is not a verification record. If agents are going to work like a team, they need something team-shaped. That does not mean a giant platform. It can start as a local SQL-Lite ledger that is enough to change the workflow. The agent no longer has to ask, what did we decide earlier? It can ask the ledger. The human no longer has to ask, did anything actually pass? They can inspect the verified state. That is a practical improvement. The buyer question is simple. When would I install this? I would not install it for one prompt edits. If I ask an agent to change one line and run one test, a ledger is probably too much. I would install it when work crosses a boundary. More than one agent, more than one session. More than one branch, more than one person, more than one day. That is where state starts to matter. I would also use it for risky work, where proof matters, auth changes, migrations, payment logic, release tasks. Anything where done should not mean trust me. In those cases, the ledger is not overhead. It is a receipt. What was attempted, what was verified, what remains unknown, that receipt is valuable even if the agent fails, especially if the agent fails. Because a failed agent run with clear state is easier to rescue than a confident agent run with no trail. The final point is that OMG does not need to be the future of coding agents to be important. The idea is important by itself. Agent work needs durable local state. Not everything belongs in the prompt. Not every handoff should be a paragraph. Not every done should be trusted. Not every tool should own every permission. Those ideas will show up in many systems. Maybe OMG becomes a daily tool, maybe another ledger wins, maybe the pattern gets absorbed into editors and terminal agents. But the direction is obvious. As soon as coding agents become more than one chat window, coordination becomes infrastructure, and the infrastructure will look boring. Task state, path reservations, handoffs, verification, observed, git changes, local storage, audit trails. That is exactly the kind of boring that makes powerful tools usable. So no, OMG is not exciting because it promises an AI development team. It is exciting because it admits the AI development team needs a ledger before it needs another motivational demo. There is one more reason this matters. Agent mistakes are becoming harder to diagnose. When a human developer breaks something, you can usually ask what they changed and why. The answer might be wrong, it might be incomplete, but there is a person with a memory of the work with agents. The trail can disappear into tool calls and summaries. The final answer says fixed, the diff exists, the test output exists somewhere above, but the causal chain is fuzzy. Why did the agent choose this file? Why did it ignore the other failing test? Why did it decide the blocker was resolved? Why did it touch a file outside the plan? Those questions matter when the patch is wrong. OMG can make that failure easier to debug, not by preventing every mistake, by preserving the shape of the work. This task led to this subtask. This worker claimed this file. This check verified this state. This later change invalidated that state. This handoff told the next worker to avoid that path. That is the kind of audit trail agents need, because the more autonomous the system becomes, the more important it is to know how it got somewhere. Autonomy without a trail is not productivity, it is mystery. The best version of OMG would also make agents more honest. Right now, agents often answer in prose because prose is the interface. Prose is flexible, prose is persuasive, prose is also slippery. A ledger forces some claims into sharper shapes. Blocked, reserved, verified, superseded, waiting for review, failed check, needs human decision. Those states are harder to handwave. An agent can still be wrong, but the wrongness has a location. If it marks something verified without evidence, that is visible. If it claims a path without releasing it, that is visible. If it leaves a task blocked while another task depends on it, that is visible. That visibility changes behavior. The agent has to produce a state the rest of the system can use. The human gets something better than a confident paragraph. They get a small operational truth that can be checked. That is the real promise here. OMG is not trying to make coding agents sound smarter. It is trying to make their work less slippery. And if agent coding is going to become normal, less slippery may be the most important upgrade of all. So the practical takeaway is not to put OMG on every tiny prompt. That would be the wrong lesson. Use it when work has to survive a handoff. Use it when two agents might touch the same repo. Use it when done needs evidence. Use it when the next person or the next agent has to understand what already happened. That is the lane. OMG is not the star developer. It is a shared state that stops the star developers from tripping over each other. And in a world where coding agents are becoming easier to run in parallel, that shared state is not optional for long.